I'm going to be reading some more scary stories on the subreddit r/LetsNotMeet because I literally have no other ideas, so this is what you're getting. To the guy in my bedroom. I was 23 years old at the time and a student. I was living alone in a small apartment complex not too far away from my school. I've never liked living alone. I was also afraid of the dark. However, I've always felt safe in my little apartment. It only had one way to get in and you needed to unlock 2 doors to get inside. The main front door to the building and the door to my apartment. I also used to have a few lights on even at night and my laptop was usually playing some movie until I fell asleep. I always locked my door, except this one time. One weekend I went out drinking with my friends and when I was going back home I ended up sharing a taxi with a random guy that was going to the same area as me. We both jumped out of the taxi outside my place and talked for a little while. He was about the same age as me and he said he was also a student. He walked me to my front door and we said goodnight and I went inside. Some weeks, maybe a month later, I decided to stay home that weekend. I was just watching some series in bed until I fell asleep. Suddenly I woke up to a voice. I couldn't really hear what the voice was saying, but I could hear it was a man talking. I opened my eyes, the room was dark, but I could see a shadow standing in the doorway to my bedroom. I froze. My adrenaline started pumping. I couldn't scream, I just kept staring at the figure. I thought I must be dreaming. This has to be a nightmare. But I understood quickly my biggest fear had come true. He stopped talking and I asked quietly, "Who are you?" He took a step closer and whispered, "Don't you remember me?" He was clearly drunk, but I suddenly could see it was the same guy I shared a taxi with some weeks ago. I felt some weird feeling of relief that I recognised him, but at the same time I was horrified. My thoughts started spinning. What did he want? Why was he here? I didn't know what to do. There was no place to hide or to run to. My first thought was to try and stay calm, so I asked quietly what he was doing here. "I was thinking about you," he said, and continued. "I turned off your lights and closed your laptop." He smiled. I kept looking at him. I was still in my bed, still didn't know what to do. I felt sick of the thought of him walking around my apartment while I was sleeping, but decided that I would continue to stay calm. I asked him how he got into my building. He said that I'd been ringing my doorbell but I didn't open, so he tried my neighbour's doorbell and someone opened up for him. He also went into my neighbour's apartment but realised it wasn't mine. He then saw my name at the door and went in. I think he could see the fear in my eyes. He suddenly turned around and said, "I think I should go." He stumbled out and I went after him. Right before he left, he said, "You should really lock your door." I shut the door in his face and locked it. I went back to bed and cried. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I never called the police, but I told my friends the next day. The following month, someone would ring my doorbell every now and then in the middle of the night. I would get an anxiety attack every time. I never opened up, but I had a feeling it could be him. I never saw the guy again. I'm so relieved nothing happened that night, and from this day I always double check that I have locked. I also removed my name from the door, so to this guy, let's not meet again. Creepy neighbour. 2 years ago, I moved to the UK for university, as I always wanted to go there and get away from my parents as the situation at home was beginning to become too toxic for me. In the first year at uni, I moved into a student accommodation and met some really great people. It was a good year, without meeting my boyfriend, who I'm still with, and just enjoying my time away from my family and discovering what independence really meant. Anyhow, as second year came by, I decided with some friends to move into a house rented by student accommodations, but at least we had our own house and weren't restricted as much with noise and parties as living in a small shared flat in our first year. I had a ground floor room and my window gave into a very small backyard in which I would go smoke every day as I'm a smoker, and in which there would be a very thin wooden door giving into the other side of the street where you'd put your bins and broken chairs. The door could only be closed and locked from inside the backyard, but since it was an old door we had to attach some strings and keep it closed for good. I had neighbours on each side of the house, so we were surrounded by families and some other student accommodations. The neighbours on the right of us were 5 boys who looked way over the age of being in university. They were strange, so to say. I met one of them outside of our house one day because of a police intervention due to one of his flatmates attacking him and the others with kitchen knife and burning their kitchen down. I heard some screams and so I went outside with my flatmates and saw one of them being covered in blood and cuts everywhere on his arm and a wound on his head inflicted by a kitchen knife. Me and my flatmates didn't know what to do, so we offered him our help to clean himself and gave him an old t-shirt to change out of his bloody clothes. We then saw the guy who hurt these flatmates being escorted out by the police and into a van and driven off to be arrested. Anyway, the guy who he helped was quite weird. He said lots of BS and kept trying to grab me and flirt with me. And we noticed when helping him he smoked quite a lot of marijuana, but just didn't really care at the moment as we just wanted to make sure he was okay as we didn't know him. Then after some time had passed, I would go to uni and come back home and see him quite often in the street and just never said a word to him again. But one day he came up to me in the street while I went to the corner shop and started talking to me weirdly, and I didn't feel comfortable at all with that for some reason, so I just didn't respond to him. He then just said, "Oh, that's okay, I'll just wait in front of your house then and we can talk further." No need to say I was creeped out and just thought he was joking, so I bought my drink at the shop and headed back to my street. and as I turned into the street where my house was, I saw him with his flatmates sitting on my doorstep and waiting for me. So I panicked and went back to the corner shop and called my only guy flatmate to ask him to open the door and to tell the guys to go away. But obviously he wasn't home and no one else was either. So I literally just waited it out until they left 1 hour later and sprinted back home and locked the front door. My front door had a glass panel on it where you would be able to kind of make out who was standing in front of it. After this already pretty scary encounter, I just tried to avoid the guy. I mostly succeeded for a while. But then one day as I went out smoking in the backyard, I noticed the wooden door, which is always closed, was open, and the strings that we put there to keep it closed were cut off. For whatever reason, I didn't think anything of it and just closed the door again and put a new string on it, thinking it was one of my flatmates who took the bins out and just didn't tie it back. The weird neighbours would very often scream and yell and fight in their house, and it would wake me and my flatmates up in the middle of the night. But we kind of just got used to it after a while. But one evening my boyfriend slept over like he usually did, and he, who usually never wakes up because of a noise, woke up in the middle of the night because of a bang and some whispering. I was sound asleep, so he very silently woke me up and we both just waited in the dark and listened for any other noises. Suddenly we heard the wooden door just bang, just shot open, and some footsteps next to my window. In brackets, I always had my window open because it would just get really warm inside. So we both just froze. And then we heard the door leading to the backyard getting shaken softly as if they were trying to get inside. And then they stopped. Luckily we had the curtains closed so they couldn't see us, but we were ready to get dressed and get the F out of that room and lock them in if they came in from the window. Then we just heard my window move and get more open, and one of the guys saying something in a different language that we didn't understand, and started to hear them trying to get in. My boyfriend and I just shot up out of the bed, took my phone and put clothes on and ran out of the room and out of the house. So I then called my flatmates and told them to lock themselves in their room and then call the police, who luckily came in less than 5 minutes as the headquarters were a couple of streets down from us. I don't remember anything after the police came. I think me and my boyfriend were in shock. They ended up catching one guy. The other fled and was later found a few streets up smoking weed. The police went inside their house and found a lot of drugs and said that they were just carrying a massive kitchen knife with them. I was so confused as I've never done anything to offend or do anything wrong to my neighbours, so the idea of them breaking in with God knows what intentions with a kitchen knife terrorised me and my boyfriend. The two guys ended up being arrested and one of them was put into prison for 2 years for carrying a weapon with intention to harm. I've never heard anything else from the police and I've moved back home a few months later, as I was so scared and it tormented me for months on end, not knowing what would have happened if my boyfriend didn't wake up. I'm now still coping with it and finding it really tough to get over it, always asking myself what if and what would have happened if. I now very often wake up because of the slightest noise and get horrible nightmares because of it. But hey, at least I'm still with my boyfriend and we often talk about it and it helps a lot. Guy chased us home. Last year I was going out for drinks with my friends, but since I had to go uni the next day I only stayed around until midnight. My boyfriend promised to pick me up and go home with me because I don't like to take the subway alone at night, but since I was pretty drunk by then, I took a little too long walking out of the pub. Unfortunately we had to wait for the night bus since the subway closes on weekends at night. For context, my boyfriend and I don't live together but very close to each other, around 15-20 minutes walking distance. Both areas are pretty shitty. He lives near a train station and I live in a cheap, bad district with a high crime rate. The building has 2 entrances on 2 different streets because it is a corner building site leading to a patio and then to the apartment building and its doors. In brackets, to get into my apartment I have to open 3 doors. I usually use the entrance door that is nearer to the subway and on the side of my apartment. We had to take 2 buses to go home. One drove us to the train station and the next one from the train station to my apartment. After getting out of the first bus we realised that we would have to wait around 20 minutes or something for the second bus to come, and since I really had to sleep at home I didn't want to stay at his place. My boyfriend didn't want to wait so he persuaded me to walk instead of taking the bus, which sober me would have never done, but since I was still drunk I didn't care how I got home so I agreed. So we started to walk home and passed a few sketchy people, mostly people selling drugs etc, but nothing really bad. Then I saw a guy walking in our direction and I somehow got a bad feeling, so I told my boyfriend that I wanted to change to the other side of the street because I didn't want to walk past him. Suddenly the guy yelled hey as if he wanted to ask us something, but we ignored it and continued to walk. He got louder and louder until he started to yell. I could see from the corner of my eye that he was coming over, so I whispered run to my boyfriend, took his hand and ran the fastest I could while he was chasing us. We ran and then made a turn to the right, the street where I live, and hid. It seemed like he was gone. So I took out my keys and we started running towards my building, taking the other entrance of my building that I normally didn't use. As I was trying to open the door, my boyfriend started panicking, throwing me inside the patio and closing the door aggressively and then pushing me into the building. He explained that the guy came running from the other side of the street, meaning that he took a shortcut, probably thinking we were going to run to the subway/bus stops. If we had taken the other entrance, he would have clearly been the faster one. Being in shock, we unfortunately didn't call the police, which I regret. I stopped going out for drinks/clubbing for half a year after this and slept at my boyfriend's place for 2 weeks because I was scared that he would come back. I think the worst thing about this is that he really wanted to get us for whatever reason. I still want to know why he chased us for so long. Well, that's the end of that. I am now scared as fuck, as well as also being very, very tired, so I'm going to finish this and then crawl into bed and sleep for 10 hours. Okay, I'll see you whenever I next see you.